Joining us now to dissect this entire situation, we have Paul Daniel Nahus. He's, of course, a law enforcement and security expert. Mr. Nahus, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me here.
Alrighty, so where do we start essentially? Were you able to read the Prime Minister's full statement, or at least take it in via the Parliament channel, and of course your overall thoughts on what was revealed by the Prime Minister via the audit report?
So I had a chance to read up on what was said, and the audit report was not shared around the place, but the Prime Minister pulled out some sections. And I say audit report just because it's termed that. I'm not sure how in-depth the audit was, or if it was an actual audit, because we have seen politically for years now, what has happened is that people are handpicked to do quote-unquote audit, and then it comes out exactly the way the government wants it to come out. And everyone else is just demonized. So I would not consider it an audit, a real audit report, unless more is seen into it or more is provided to look into. And what he said, the overall scope of it is this: the SSA. I do believe that there were some misgivings in the SSA. I think that is very apparent. However, at the same time, it seems like this is becoming a repeat of Emailgate. It's becoming a repeat of this thing where something is just taken, I don't want to say out of context, but it's blown up in a certain way. I'm not saying that there were not problems there. I'm not saying that it's not a serious situation. It is a very serious situation when anything is involved with the SSA, given its mandate. However, my question is, how is it allowed to go on so long under this National Security Council, under this National Security Minister? How none of these flags were raised, nothing was seen. And in terms of the whistleblower legislation, I don't think that would have made any type of difference, because it seemed that everyone was in some kind of collusion, but the government seemed to be blind to it. And if the government is blind to their premier, as they term it, spy agency, then things are really bad from that perspective.
Accountable to, essentially? Is it the National Security Ministry? Are there annual reports submitted to the National Security Ministry where these discrepancies would have come up? I did see somewhere among my notes, if we even just look at the ammunition procured by the SSA, there was an unbelievable jump from, I believe, a few thousand, like just about 8,000. In 2021, it went up to 100,000. That's right. No, we went from 2020, 16,000 to 2021, 52,000 to 2022, 100,000 rounds of ammunition.
So I want to put it like this. The first thing I would say is that I find it very strange that the former commissioner would get blamed for everything passing, but in terms of those massive, quote-unquote, massive ammunition purchases in those years, who was the commissioner at that point in time? Why did the minister not speak with the commissioner about why that was allowed, if it was allowed, in terms of being purchased? Now, I'm not sure if it was because some people doing these audits for the government seem to confuse the terminology all the time. So I don't know if it was purchased or it was just acquired. There's a big difference, because a lot of ammunition and weapons would have come from the old SWOT units, given to the SSA as well. Now, let's just deal with the number of 100,000. It depends on the purpose, of course, because let's say they said there was an operational unit. Now, whether they were supposed to be operational unit or not, that's up for the government to decide. If there was an operational unit running and they're not supposed to have an operational unit or a tactical unit, then that was a massive drop of the ball by the minister in not realizing that was going on. However, if indeed they had an operational unit that was properly run and functioning, then 100,000 rounds is nothing, honestly, because you have to factor in how much rounds is needed for training. So, for example, let's just say, I have a calculator here, so let's just do rough figures. Let's just say the operational unit had 20 people, and you have 20 people doing training, let's just say requalification every quarter, and to prepare fit to do the requalification. Let's say they're running through about 500 rounds. That's 20 multiplied by 500 per quarter. Multiply that by 4, and then you get 40,000 rounds just for requalification and that type of training, without any specialized tactical training and so. And those are just throwing. If I'm wrong in terms of a few figures here and there, excuse me, but ammunition burns through very quickly when it comes to training and prepping and so on. And then, of course, you have to have sets for operational purposes set aside. You have to have for your guard details set aside. And I would put it in this way that the Prime Minister did say as well that they broke international best practice, as in they were storing training and operational wrongs together and this and that. I think he should really review what goes on in law enforcement Trinidad if that is a concern of his, because, for example, while the TTPS has their ammunition stations for operations, their training ammunition and their operational ammunition are drawn from the same bunker in the police academy, well, behind the police academy in the armory. So I think that when I see things like that, I tend to think the Prime Minister may not understand the entire scope of it or understand things in context. Now, I'm not saying that they were correct to have an operational unit. I'm not saying that there was not some type of concern. There was a lot of concern, I think. However, certain things I'm not sure are seen in context.
So let me ask you this. When you procure ammunition, because all this is happening in a climate where at murder scenes, at crime scenes, we are seeing, how do you call it, the casings with TTPS marks, for instance. This is a reality. See the reports in the newspapers almost on a weekly basis. So this is happening in that climate. When you purchase ammunition, is it already marked by the how does the marking? Is it marked by the person you're procuring it from?
Yeah. So excellent question. The when ammunition is procured, if it's procured for certain agencies, and it comes through dealers, but it has to be procured from certain agencies. Once it's confirmed that it's procured for this, being procured for this agency, and it's going directly to them, then once you have an order large enough, the manufacturer will stamp what you want to be stamped on the ammo. So, for example, TTPS would be T.T.P.S. Regiment will have their markings, Air Guard will have their markings. Now, if you have a small amount, for example, like prisons actually has to put their own markings on it when it comes. I'm not going to reveal what that is, obviously, but they have to put their own markings because they don't order enough quantity to make it worthwhile for the manufacturer to actually market. So the markings from TTPS would have come from, the TTPS ammunition comes from Brazil, actually, from Agtech factory. And when they bought some years back, when Stephen Williams was commissioner, they bought, I think it was somewhere around 5-6 million rounds or something for TTPS. So you understand in the millions how much is really needed for training, for operations, and also for rotation of ammunition. Ammunition does degrade. Ammunition does go bad and get faulty over time, especially if not kept in proper temperature control environments, which may not be practical for TTPS, may not be practical for certain agencies. So it's actually best practice to take that ammunition and to use it for training purposes, to bring it out and replace it with new ammunition. That generally doesn't really happen too much. Just dispose of ammunition. Yeah.
Of course, when you reference that purchase done under Stephen Williams, those millions, when we look at 100,000, it really isn't that much comparatively.
No, it's not much, and it's a matter of a lot is going on in terms of maybe making way for the firearm control bill that they're trying to push. A lot of it is just being I want to say, for lack of a better word, being inflated to make some kind of panic in the public. And I'm not saying it's not a matter of concern and you have to look into it, but I will just give a quick example of when I was working for TTPS, when I was working for national security, as the firearm subject matter expert and training subject matter expert. There was an incident that happened, or an issue I should say, where the head of I'm not going to say which unit, but a certain tactical unit needed ammunition for their tactical training, tactical support training. And this was training to guard the Prime Minister, to guard the President, to guard the Minister. This was training to guard ministers and so on. And the head of the Assistant Commissioner of Administration, who approves the ammunition use, issued 50 rounds per person for training. And besides from that being ridiculously low on a regular, in a regular case, I had to call and try to see what was going on, because she was honestly, she just wanted to be justified, because she just defaulted to what the basic training qualification wrongs were, where this training is training with automatic weapons, training to use suppressive fire, training to cover, training to do a lot of different things. And that tactical training by each person needed around, they needed a couple thousand rounds each. And let's just say a couple thousand, let's say 2,000 rounds each. and we're dealing with wanting to qualify, let's just say even 15 people, you're coming up to 30,000 rounds in a few days of training.
You're not sworn to secrecy, right?
No, I have no confidentiality agreement given that, but I will pick and choose exactly what I say, not to jeopardize the national security apparatus of the country.
Okay, so allow me to just quote from the Prime Minister's statement. The audit also found disturbing practices of nepotism and opportunism. Such persons belonged to a cult which was arming itself while preaching a doctrine for trained military and parliamentary personnel with a religious calling to be the most suitable persons to replace the country's political leadership. Now, given the fact that we are looking for 70,000 rounds of ammunition, I mean, some persons may want to believe that this cultish group was planning a coup.
Okay, so I find it very funny that this government is talking about about nepotism. But anyway, we'll pass that point. In terms of in terms of calling something a cult and so on, you need to be very careful about certain statements. I think statements are made very recklessly in Parliament. I would challenge the Prime Minister to make it outside, in that, not for my purpose, but for the country. And I would actually challenge him to deal with it if it is this serious. If he suspects it's a coup, there must be evidence to that. If there's a conspiracy to have a coup, there must be some type of evidence towards that. And there are charges associated with it, so it's very important that it be dealt with. I mean, I don't think that this group with their limited training, they had training, but limited training also, could challenge the officers of the MOPS unit, of the IATF, of the GB. I mean, I don't think it's a threat. It will be as much a threat, but you can't disregard anything. So the Prime Minister would have concerns, and if indeed 70,000 rounds of ammunition is missing, if that is indeed true, I think that you should be hearing about raids all the time on his compound. There should be a scramble right now, searching for that ammunition. Because if you're saying 70,000 rounds have been stolen, basically, or alluding to that, for the purpose of overthrowing a government, that he had to call the troops for that the military should be involved in that operation as well at this point, if you believe that there's some type of plot to overthrow the government, because that is a very serious thing. And I'm not saying that there is or there isn't. It's just that I just find that there's not enough information being given, and if it is serious, I don't feel like it's being treated as if it's that serious.
And it's quite ironic that these allegations of the cultish allegations, etc., that this is coming from the agency that's supposed to be weeding out any threats to national security, any threats to the government, to the people, to the citizenry. They are the ones now being accused of acquiring ammunition for their own purposes.
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, it comes back to who'll guard the guards, and that's why the minister needs to be the one to answer for this. How did it happen under his watch?
So, in his statement, the Prime Minister also saying among the firearms ammunition coming into possession of the SSA in the period under review, several of them were issued from the TTPS armory to the Special Operations Response Team. Now, the Prime Minister, interestingly, also referenced speaking about the sort, this involved killings where it was said by a police commissioner and subordinates that persons in police custody actually died when they quote-unquote fell off a chair. Only recently, this sick joke was repeated by a former police commissioner who used the explanation to assure the public that the unfortunates who fell off a chair, and I quote, could never rape anyone again. The Prime Minister did cite that, but when you speak to the general public, the feedback of the general public, they really are not moved by the idea that, persons in police custody could, quote-unquote, fall off a chair and die. They are actually, talk to some of them, they'll be happy, and they would agree with this former police commissioner because of the lack of confidence in the TTPS and the judiciary.
So I want to say, first of all, this is why this statement was repeated. Say it outside the Parliament, because at no time did the former commissioner say that they died as a result of falling off of a chair. He never said they fell off a chair and died. there was a struggle that ensued, and there were issues that went on with the persons resisting arrest. I believe that's what happened, and people were injured in the whatever struggle ensued in placing them under arrest. When they were put to sit down on a chair, they did at some point in time they did fall off of the chair they were put down on due to whatever injuries or so they had. But at no time did the commissioner ever say that they died because they fell off a chair. It was not because of that. They did fall off a chair at some point when they couldn't sit down properly. That was in the report. However, at the same time, the commissioner never said that. So the Prime Minister keeps repeating it in Parliament, where you are protected and where you could, if you would so choose, defame people. So I'll rubbish that. And in terms of the confidence in the police service, or lack thereof, people were confident that the former commissioner was on the scene, the former commissioner was handling it. They were, I mean, I'm not going to go over the stats because he's gone over the stats many times. People know the level of confidence in the police at the time because things were being actively managed and actively dealt with. A different type of leadership, a different type of approach, and over 100 initiatives that came in that did result in the reduction. I was on that team for crime reduction, and I was not in the middle of it in terms of going to arrest anyone, doing anything like that. Everyone had a support role to play, and everyone played a role in that bigger picture of reducing crime. It was a lot of work behind the scenes. Gary Griffith, the former commissioner, had a good team put together, and he was very dynamic. He kept on switching things up. As fast as the criminals moved one way, he was there to meet them already. That's how crime was being reduced at the time. And that, of course, because of that, the citizens felt safer, and it did increase the level of trust in the police service. And to go on to even, I know this is not the purpose of this, but even to touch on this whole thing of trying to demonize issuing of firearm licenses. More firearm licenses were issued, not because Gary Griffith felt he wanted to issue firearm licenses, but because his job as Commissioner of Police was to process the paperwork and to be the final signatory for that process. And when it came to him, in terms of the persons who they're claiming have charges and convictions who have FULs, well, I'm supposed to see a public notice from the commissioner, this is how you revoke an FUL, with the FUL being revoked. If they have these charges and they have these issues, why am I not seeing the public notice that the commissioner is required to issue to revoke those FULs immediately? In terms of they were claiming that somebody under the age of 25 got an FUL, which is not against the law, then at that point in time, the commissioner would have checked all the documentation, or his clerk would have checked all documentation, and that falls on the division at the investigative level. The commissioner was not an investigator, so that's just to throw into that issuing of firearms, legal firearms, there was a massive reduction of crime at the time.
So, Mr. Nahus, unfortunately, our time has come to an end. Let me thank you very much for joining us, and really dissecting this issue, of course, sharing your views and your perspective. Paul Daniel Nahus, law enforcement and security expert, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me again, dear. Take care.
All the best.